Greetings and salutations, folks. I love vintage denim. They just don't make jeans the way that they used to. I mean, literally, they don't make denim jeans the way that they used to make them. However, I don't think that I've ever managed to buy a pair of jeans that just fit me right off the peg. There's a couple reasons for that. Number one, the myth of standardized sizing. Number two, body ideals were different in different eras. You know, things just were put together a little bit differently. So I have here 3 pairs of vintage jeans. They have that wonderful vintagey patina all over them. Despite my best efforts, they do not quite fit me. Mind you, they're just a tad off. I do not recommend buying a large pair of jeans or anything and turning it into a small anything. It just seems kind of unfair to deplete the vintage market of large size items. I'm gonna try out a couple of similar but slightly different alteration techniques for the first 2 pairs. And then I have a classic styling hack for the 3rd pair that I think will help it to fit a little bit better. So without further ado, let's get into it. First and foremost, here are the tools I used throughout the process. I used a see-through ruler, any straight edge will do really, and tape measure. I used a chalk marker and pins to mark and hold the fabric in place. Fabric shears for bigger cuts, a seam ripper, and snips for smaller cuts. I used a light colored sew-all thread. Denim fabric has highs and lows. You can see the darker wash of the denim, but also quite a lot of white. You want to more closely match the lighter shades. Denim also almost always has golden top stitching. This thread is usually a bit thicker, and most sewing shops carry thread that is specifically used for top stitching denim, so you can get a pretty close match. For the 3rd pant, I added a zipper. This is a super cheap basic zipper the length of the 3rd pant's fly, a button that fit through the buttonhole, and I sewed this all with a needle and white sew-all thread. You can absolutely sew denim by hand. It is thick and I recommend a thimble, but it's possible. I used my trusty industrial sewing machine for the majority of the stitching, and a domestic machine, meaning one of the typical at-home sewing machines for the buttonhole. I used a denim-specific needle for both, and my lawyer husband informs me I need to tell you all to wear eye protection while sewing thick fabric, which I 100% did. This is the first pair of jeans. They're a classic Levi's 501 with a button fly. They have a really low rise, which means this measurement from the center of the crotch seam up the front of the jeans is small, and these are meant to sit lower on the waist, where the waist is naturally wider. I tried these on and they needed about 2 inches total removed, which is a pretty small alteration. Because I wasn't taking out a ton of fabric, the alteration was achieved via a dart at the back. A dart does give the back a bit more shape, but I divided the 2 inches between 2 1-inch darts, so the shaping wouldn't be as noticeable. First, I unpicked the center back belt loop. Easier said than done because belt loops are super reinforced. Just be careful and take your time. Next, I unpicked the waistband. For this alteration style, the entire back of the waistband needs to be unpicked, but you can leave the front in place. I used a seam ripper for this. There are many ways to unpick a seam, but because denim has nice rounded seams, it's really easy to get in there with a seam ripper. Next, I measured and marked my darts. 501s have a V-shaped yoke at the back, and the key is to place the darts where they can be as long as possible. That will keep the slope gentle, so there aren't any pointy dart points. But also the flat-felled seam at the V can warble if the dart point is too close. I measured 1 inch off of center back, and then each dart was 1 inch wide. I also marked the center of the dart. I drew a line straight down to about 1/2 inch from the flat-felled seam. I connected the dart legs to make my dart pie slice. I folded the dart and sewed from the waistband edge to the dart point, leaving a tail instead of back stitching. I tied off my tail like a good fashion construction student. Now there is more waistband than waist seam. The next alteration will have a more refined, proper way to deal with this, but for this simpler alteration, I just cut the center of the waistband. There are 2 schools of thought for this next part. You could in theory place one end of the waistband and then fold the other on top of it to have no raw edges. But that would make a big, thick seam. I opted to cut one piece slightly longer and just lap the pieces to keep things as flat as possible. What is denim without some raw edges anyway? I top stitched over the waistband edge using top stitching thread. Finally, I replaced the belt loop to cover the seam, also using top stitch thread. Et voila! Low-rise pants that have just the right amount of slouchiness without the constant tug. Here is pant 2. Never you mind the unsynced audio. These needed a bit more of an adjustment. The rise is higher, and I find high-rise pants to be a trickier fit since they need to fit all through the hip region. The waist was actually not too bad, only about 1 inch needed to be removed. The hip and thigh is a bigger issue. I was but a lass when these pants were in style, but I remember that tight waist, baggy thighs was a thing. I want things to be just a bit more fitted, so I'll need to bring in the entire hip area. This will be a more proper-ish alteration. I unpicked all the belt loops from the waistband, but left them attached to the actual pant. I unpicked the waistband. This time I removed almost the entire thing. I left the side with the button intact, since I can easily make a new buttonhole, but these buttons require special equipment that I don't have. Then I unpicked the side seam to just below the back pocket. I laid the front of the pant on top of the back so that the new position of the seam gently tapered into the seam lower on the leg, and pinned. I made sure I was only removing half an inch at the waist. Denim usually has quite a bit of ease throughout the butt and thigh area, so this ease can be removed to create a tighter fit without the alteration being too noticeable. I sewed this on the machine using a zipper foot to get right up alongside the rivet. If you're a handy seamstress with a serger, you can serge this seam to cover the raw edge. I have a complex relationship with sergers, plus I just didn't care. I did top stitch along the edge of the seam towards the back of the pant to keep the seam allowance in place. I cut the end of the waistband to the new length plus half-inch seam allowance. I unpicked the original buttonhole stitching and tucked the seam allowance inside. I placed the waistband. You can see the original placement of the belt loops and how much width was removed from the waist. I carefully placed the new edge over the fly area and top stitched the entire waistband. I used a not so professional trick here. I didn't have the exact top stitch color for this pair, so instead I left the shards of the original top stitching in place and sewed over the waistband with the light sew all thread. The new top stitch line is virtually invisible, and the old top stitch scraps are secured with the new top stitch. From my experience, this will hold up pretty well, actually. I replaced all the belt loops. I marked a new buttonhole that was the diameter of the button plus 1/8 inch for ease. Most domestic machines will have a buttonhole function. My domestic will not accept a thick top stitch thread for a buttonhole stitch, so I used a yellow silk thread instead. My machine also hates sewing thick fabric, and the difference in thickness here meant my buttonhole turned out an interesting shape. Who cares? It functioned and it will be covered by the button. So, funny story, I thought my toddler ran off with 2 of the belt loops, hence why 2 are missing. Then hot tip, put belt loops in the pocket to keep track of them. Just remember that you do it. Okay, so bonus here is pant 3. I bought these on Etsy and the rise was misrepresented. These are incredibly high rise and pretty large on me all around. It's okay, I'm gonna try the old-fashioned school standby, overlapping the fly. Pretty sure every student at my university came to school on the first day, decided their pants were too boring, bought a bunch of oversized Levi's from Goodwill, and overlapped the zipper like this to give them that avant-garde, asymmetrical fit. You can absolutely just safety pin this and be on your way, or you can spend 10 minutes adding a zipper and make a slightly more permanent alteration that doesn't feature the front peephole. First, I marked with an erasable pen, which is another tool I used, but this could easily be done with the chalk also, where the overlap needed to hit for the pants to fit my waist. This is a super cheap basic zipper, the length of the original fly. I chose a contrasting color to hopefully make this more intentional looking. I laid the zipper onto the pant with the edge along the mark and pinned. I stitched along the outside of the zip tape. No zipper foot necessary. Next, I carefully positioned the other side of the zipper tape along the pant fly, making sure the zipper teeth were right at the edge. I again stitched over the edge of the zip tape. I marked and hand sewed the button to the buttonhole's new position. And she's done! This style isn't for everyone, but it is a really quick fix when you just need your pant to fit. If your pants are even more oversized on you, then this will create a more dramatic diagonal at the front, which will make it look even more intentional. The really cool thing about this alteration is that it is totally reversible. You could easily just take this zipper off and the pants would be exactly as they were to begin with. I hope these techniques are useful for you all in the future. Almost all jeans are different, and these are but 3 of thousands of possible alterations. One of the best parts about making these videos is actually reading about you all's techniques in the comments, so feel free to pop down there if you have any other denim alteration tips to share. If you enjoyed this video, I always appreciate a thumbs up, and feel free to hit subscribe. My videos are usually more historically inspired, and I have a huge project that I'm just about ready to start rolling out, so keep a weather eye out for that. Until next time, bye!